Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is the Audit Committee. This is February 29th, 1:03 p.m. We'll go ahead and get started. For any members joining us remotely, if you would like to make a public comment, you will be addressed during the public comment period and be given 3 minutes for your public comment at that time. I will hand it over to our chair.
Thank you. I'd like to call the Audit Committee meeting to order at 1:04 p.m. on Thursday, February the 29th, 2024. I will say that since we have one person appearing remotely, everything will be, all votes will be by a roll call. And we've got another board member here just in time. And I'll let you do the roll call.
Director Makachuk?
Present.
Director Mohan?
Present.
Director Lopez?
Here.
Committee Member Sangha?
Present.
Thank you. All members are present. We have a quorum.
Thank you. With that, I'll open this for public comment on any matters that are not on the agenda that are relevant to Silicon Valley Clean Energy. Any member of the public can speak. If you're appearing remotely, please raise your virtual hand.
No hands raised.
No hands raised. I'll close public comment. There's no one here physically present from the public. So we'll close public comment and we'll move to the consent calendar. And there's one item on consent, which is to approve the minutes of the September 19th, 2023 Audit Committee meeting. I'll open that for public comment. Anyone want to make a comment? If so, raise your virtual hand. No comments. No hands raised. Close public comment. There's no one here in person. With that, any discussion on the consent calendar? No?
I'd like to make a motion to accept.
I'll second. We have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Makachuk?
Aye.
Mohan?
Aye.
Lopez?
Aye.
Committee Member Sangha?
Aye.
That carries.
Thank you. With that, we'll move to our regular calendar. Item 2, welcome and audit committee overview. This is a discussion. And with that, I believe, Amrit, you're going to lead us in that.
Yes. So thank you, committee members. Thanks for joining us again. So I'm going to go through an overview. It's very similar to what we talked about last time, but I thought it'd be good to touch bases. And I'll also talk a little bit about our accounting function and finance function a little bit. Hey, like this. So I just wanted to give a little overview about finance. Our core accounting function, as you know from last time, we outsource our core accounting function, our accountancy. So in-house finance function, we have budgeting and financial forecasting, rate setting, financial analysis and reporting, investment management, reserve and liquidity management, purchasing other than energy procurement, vendor management, energy and enterprise risk management. These are the core finance functions that we have in-house. Then the accounting function, and Mike Maher may be online, we source from Maher Accountancy. Maher Accountancy, you may remember, providing accounting services for a lot of the CCAs. Most, if there are very few that don't use Maher Accountancy. So they basically do all the core accounting functions for SVCE. This includes accounts payable, receivable, financial statements, managing our general ledger, and they're the key liaison between SVCE and our independent auditor. That sort of puts in perspective how we do accounting in SVCE. Next, I'll talk a little bit about the highlights of what's in scope for the committee. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of questions. Can you go back one slide, please? Just a couple items that are relevant. The investment management, they do the accounting for that. Where's the investment management done?
So in terms of planning, we do that in-house, but as you remember, we have hired an independent investment portfolio manager, PFM asset management. So we have a lot of our funds that we, out of close to 300 million, more than 300 or 325 million or so of cash that we're holding right now, reserves. About 110 million is invested through PFM Asset Management as our portfolio manager working on our behalf in relationship. And then the rest we're managing ourselves. We have it in a finance camp asset management program, and some small amount we keep for day-to-day operations in our bank, which is City Bank in Sacramento.
Okay. Then the other one that catches my eye, and I would just like you to speak to it a little bit, is the energy and enterprise risk management. Things that say risk kind of catch the audit committee's attention.
Yes.
Can you just give us a brief overview of that, please?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about energy risk management first. So energy, as you know, we procure electricity on behalf of our customers, and that's a very volatile commodity. So there are whole industry-leading practices in how you manage and control the risk and exposure of energy. There are roles and responsibilities that are delineated for front office, which is right now. Then there's the middle office function that we see in the finance. And then there's also a back office function that's seen by another manager who aligned to me. So those are the key front, middle, back office. We have an energy risk management policy that's available on our website that basically delineates the roles and responsibilities of each of the three offices, who can do what. It also basically lays out how we manage the risk of the portfolio, where we have a laddering approach, 5-year step hedging program, where we hedge energy transactions to basically avoid or reduce the volatility of the portfolio by hedging the cost. From an accounting finance perspective, we basically are responsible for measuring, monitoring, and identifying risk of the portfolio. Then there's the enterprise risk management, which is obviously looking at the entire agency as a whole. And that's an ERM framework that's very industry leading in most industry practices. So that's basically looking at comprehensively what are the risks and opportunities that can affect our mission, and how do we manage and mitigate that risk to a acceptable level of tolerance. So we go through a bottoms-up approach within the organization. We say, what are some of the risk events that can happen? And then we assess them using our expertise. What's the likelihood of that risk materializing? And if it were to materialize, what's the consequence? We basically rate them depending on likelihood and on a matrix. And then out of also that function, we have a stress testing function. Some of you may have heard of stress testing. Last year, it made news that one of the banks that failed, Silicon Valley Bank, they had not done adequate stress testing, for what if interest rates went up. So likewise, we do stress testing in our portfolio, like what could happen if energy prices were to increase or decrease, and what the implications of that are for our portfolio. And then we can do other stress tests as well. But those are some of the financial stress tests that we do.
My last question on this slide is the reserve management, and that ties into what you just mentioned on stress tests. Can you just talk about the reserve policy and the risk with that, and how that's being managed? Just give us an overview so everyone's on the same page, please.
Yeah, so reserves, we basically, obviously, we don't want to run out of money in the organization. If you run out of money, you don't exist. So managing reserves is very important. There are a lot of pressures. I talked about the volatility of the energy portfolio. Along associated with that is counterparties that we transact with that can require us to post collateral if there are positions that we have with them are sort of out of the money for us, but in the money for them. They can trigger collateral provisions that can have a lot of withdrawals of cash for us. So we have to manage liquidity and risk of liquidity. Kind of do it in a stochastic way, probabilistic way, how much cash we should be holding. And the tie to the stress test analysis is we actually take the stress test analysis, which looks at extreme but plausible events, like from a financial risk perspective, what could happen to our energy portfolio and our headroom in revenues that would put a squeeze on our competitive position. We want to be in a position that we can provide competitive service to our customers, competitive relative to PE, at least with a 1% discount. So we basically do an assessment each year. And this is the time we're kicking it off. We discussed the financial stress test this Monday this week, Finance Committee, as to what our proposed financial stress tests are. We will use the results of that to basically say, you know, these are plausible events that can happen, and how should we basically manage our reserves so we can withstand those stress cases if they were to occur. Basically, the criteria we've been using is if one of those stress cases were to occur, we want to make sure that we still end up with at least 120 days of cash on hand over a 2-year period, and at least 90 days of cash on hand over a 5-year period. So that's sort of the threshold we use every year to assess the adequacy of our reserves.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to ask a few questions on the in-house finance in the areas that could potentially impact the financial statements. So
Absolutely.
thank you for explaining that.
Very good questions.
I had a question about the 120 days. Wasn't there a change made recently? Did you add or did you expand the number of days?
So last budget year is probably what you're recalling. We went through and looked at the adequacy of reserve holdings, and we actually did not change any of the targets. So 120 has been there for a while. We looked at whether the target should be 300 or higher than 300, and we said, based on the stress test analysis we did, based on some of the views we got from the rating agencies, Moody's in particular, we decided to keep the 300 days of cash on hand. And then we have our upper reserve target, 490 days. So if we were between 300 and 490, it doesn't trigger anything per se. But if we were to go, should we be in a good position to exceed 490, which we're not projecting over 5-year anyway, projections, and that would trigger coming back to the board to say how we should use those funds.
What's the 300 and what's the 100?
120 is like minimum. We don't want to fall below that. If we were to fall below that, we have to come to the board and get us at or above.
Amrit, what was the rating agencies told us the difference would be?
Rating agencies don't give one criteria that says if you hit this, I'm going to give you a rating. They always keep room for themselves, but they said it will be credit positive, Moody's said in their last review, if SVC's reserves with 300 cash on hand or more. Assessment of that.
Thank you.
And my question was, who does energy procurement?
Currently, Monica heads that, and obviously she's going to be the CEO starting in April, and we have a director.
That's in-house, just not in finance, am I reading,
Yes,
understanding correctly? Okay.
It's the core function.
And I'm, as you can probably tell, I'm not a regular member, so
No worries.
but yeah, appreciate that.
Good question. Yeah, so the main distinction here is the accounting function. The core accounting function is outsourced. There's a lot of efficiencies in that. Mike and his entire team is very familiar with that. Okay, we'll go to the next slide if there are no more questions. So just to quickly review the purpose of the committee. So obviously it's to see the external auditor's audit of our financial statements. Remember, they're working on the committee's behalf, the board of directors' behalf. It's an opportunity to ask them any questions on any weaknesses or deficiencies that they found. And they will present the financial statements to the board and the results of the audit to the board at the March meeting. And we ask that the committee of this recommended the board to so this is this is what's happening in today's. This is the completion of the financial audit. If you remember the audit committee, this is a small committee. It doesn't meet that often, but it's a very important meeting. We meet on a regular basis. Most of the year, we meet twice a year, right? Remember to kick off the audit, which we did last September when we kicked off this financial audit. Now we're at a point where the audit is completed. The auditors are here to present the results, and this is your opportunity to ask them any questions, review the audited financial statements, the independence of the auditor. As I said, recommend to the board that they accept the results of the. Now, the IT audit. So we have Nick, our senior manager of IT and administrative services. IT audit is something we actually do on a voluntary basis. Some of it at the IT audit and the security assessment. This is an audit function. It's one of the big risks we face as an organization. It's also part of our ERM framework, but we also want to bring the results of those findings to the audit committee, as we did last time we met. So Nick will go through the results of what we found in the last audit, what improvements we've made. Obviously, he's not going to talk about anything very specific, because this is a public meeting. We don't want to talk about any specific vulnerabilities or strengths, but he will talk about how we moved advancing in these areas. And there's three types of audit. We have the security assessment. Sometimes we combine it with our audit, annual IT audit. Annual IT audit is something we've done always since our existence. The security assessment is more forward-looking, and IT audit is more looking at the infrastructures that we have in place. And then there's a CPUC mandated audit, because obviously we hold sensitive customer information. And there's a comprehensive audit that they do every 3 years, and then an annual update. This year is an annual update that we will be conducting and will be filing in April. I think the next big assessment, if annual assessment, is on April of 20. So Nick, this is one of the agenda item, and he's going to go in more detail.
So just so we're all on the same page, and when you're going through this, if you could make the clarifying demarcation in terms of the years. The fiscal year for Silicon Valley Clean Energy is September 30th of every year. And that's different than obviously the calendar year. So if you could just say, like up there where it says Q3 2024, is that calendar Q3 or is that fiscal year Q3? If you just when you're going through, if you could just reference that, just so that we're all on the same page.
And these are all calendar years.
Yes.
That was, timing of the meeting. So as I already talked about this, we meet no fewer than 2 times a year. We will be meeting 2 times. This is one, and the next meeting is in September to kick off the next financial audit. But obviously, we can meet as many times as necessary. And last year, I think we met twice a year before selecting a new auditor or new partner. Okay, any questions on the role or insights you want to gain on how we do accounting finance functions?
I have just a clarifying question. Who's new on the audit committee?
Actually, this year we have all returning members. Last year we had 5 members, 1 member of the audit committee.
Okay, so everybody's been through this a few times. Yeah, a couple of times. It should be.
Okay, so that completes item 2 on the agenda. And then item 3 is selection of the 2024 SVCE Audit Committee Chair and Vice Chair.
And I'll just confirm that there were no members of the public for that item, so no comments on that item.
Sorry, I should have opened it up for public
No,
comments.
that's fine. Yeah, so this is pretty exciting. We get to select our chair and vice chair of this committee for 2024. This will be a 1-year term. So the next time that this person will be up for their term will be in February 2025. Any member of the committee, and it will be selected amongst yourselves. So in terms of the process, it will just be, we'll We'll identify who is interested in each of these roles, and if there are more than one, we will do a roll call vote by name. Otherwise, we will need a 3-person vote to select each of these members, given we're a 4-member body, so majority. Concludes my report.
All right. I will volunteer to be chair again. And I will say that I'm currently a licensed CPA in Canada. I'm not licensed in the United States. And every year you have to go through this thing called a CPE, Continuing Professional Education. And I could tick all the boxes, I could tick no to all the boxes, but the one that I couldn't tick no to was being on an audit committee. So as being on an audit committee, I have to have 40 hours of CPE credits, 40 hours in a rolling 3 years. So just one of those commitments that I made. Is there anyone else that wish to nominate themselves or anyone else?
Wish to nominate Brian McIntyre as the chair.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Anyone else? No? Then may we have do I open it for public comment on this? I'll open it for public comment. If you're a member of the public, please raise your virtual hand. No one's appearing here.
No hands raised.
Close public comment. With that, bring it back for a roll call vote.
Director Matchuk,
Aye.
Mohan,
Aye.
Lopez,
Yes.
Sangha.
Aye.
And that carries with Director Makachek as chair of the 2024 Audit Committee.
Thank you, everyone on the board or on the committee. I'm sorry. With that, vice chair, we need a nomination, and if someone would like to indicate their interest in that, please do so. We'll open that up.
I was the vice chair last year up till now. And yeah, I'd like to be vice chair again.
So I'd like to nominate Sheila Bo.
Second that.
A motion and sorry.
I would second that.
We have a motion and a second. Anyone else? No? May we have a roll call vote? Oh, sorry. I'll open it for public comment. If you're a member of the public, please raise your virtual hand. We'll close public comment on that. Bring it back for a roll call vote.
Thank you. Chair Makachek,
Aye.
Director Lopez.
Aye.
Director Mohan,
I
Sangha.
Aye.
That carries. Director Sheila Mohan as vice chair of the 2024 Audit Committee.
Congratulations.
I just want to thank you both for volunteering.
Thank you.
Likewise.
With that, we will now go to item 4, receive financial audit report from Vicente and Brinker and recommend to the board of directors to accept the finding of the audit. With that, would you like to do an introduction?
Yeah, so we have Kellen Gilbert and Alejandra Schaefer from Vicente and Brinker. I'm gonna actually just turn it over to them. Or any questions?
Great, thank you so much, and thank you for having us. I'm not sure who has the control of the slide deck. If that's Andrea, you can please go ahead and thank you. So as we were just introduced, I'm Kellen Gilbert. I'm the audit partner, and Alejandra Schaefer is the engagement supervisor, who's been working with us here at Vicente Brinker for 4 years and has been working on CCAs that whole time. Next slide, please. So we have completed the audit. We were actually finished with the audit as of a week ago. And Silicon Valley is receiving what we call a clean audit opinion, which means that it's unmodified. And it means that we as the auditors believe that the financial statements are free of material misstatement. Next slide, please. And I was really excited to see that Emirate had the slides and the robust discussion on the roles and responsibilities between the audit committee. That's probably one of the biggest misconceptions that I face just dealing with the public and with board members, is that there's not a clear understanding between what exactly the auditor does relative to the financial statements and what does management do. And I thought that his presentation really was clearly stating all the different roles and responsibilities that management does. So I won't go through all of them. But from our perspective, the biggest responsibilities for management is establishing, testing, reviewing that system of internal controls to make sure that financial transactions on a day-to-day basis are being recorded appropriately. And when I do refer to management, we also include Mike Maher in that role. He has been contracted out by you to do the accounting functions, but from our perspective, he is part of management as he's taken the responsibility over preparing the financial statements specifically. So those are the relative roles for management. The role of the auditor is to provide our opinion, and we do that by what we call a risk-based approach. And that means that we perform our planning, review your preliminary financial numbers, and we gain an understanding of your accounting processes, your business processes, your accounting policies, and we assess risk of where a material misstatement could take place. And we do that looking at considering various factors such as the inherent risk, which means the overall complexity of that set of transactions. We can look at the volume of transactions. We can look at, if it's a high volume of transactions, that could be an indicator of higher risk, or if it's a one-time transaction that really kind of falls outside the norm, that could also be an indicator of risk. So we consider all of those things when we are designing our accounting procedures. And then we also look at the internal controls that help offset and mitigate those risks. So we really want to understand how involved management is, what level of review is taking place, what level of skills, knowledge, and expertise management has when they're reviewing the accounting entries or reconciliations to really make sure that all of those potential issues are being caught before the financial numbers are being finalized and provided to us. So once we've concluded our planning and our risk assessment procedures, we then go on to perform tests of year-end balances. And I'm going to go into those in a little bit more detail, but that's really the meat and potatoes of the audit is performing those tests. They can be everything from reviewing source material, invoices, bank statements, analytical procedures, fluctuation analysis, all sorts of different things that we do to then test those year-end balances. And then lastly, we spend a significant amount of time reading through the financial statements, relaying the underlying information within the financial statements to the accounting records, reading the disclosures, making sure that all the required and adequate disclosures are included, and also making sure that we don't think there are any unnecessary disclosures or unnecessary information within the financial statements. Next slide, please. So I kind of went through this on the last slide, but again, this is the step-by-steps of our risk assessment, looking at the operating characteristics. We do consider our other CCA clients, similar entities, government entities, other enterprise funds to make sure that we're seeing the appropriate level of policies and controls in place for the various financial statement account balances. And then again, we review your internal control policies over those what we call significant transaction cycles to make sure that they're not only designed but also operating properly. Next slide, please. So this is just a brief overview of some of the areas that we can consider to be a significant area of focus. So revenue recognition and accounts receivable, those two are typically tested in conjunction. So we want to make sure that accounts receivable is recorded appropriately at year end, but then we want to take that a step further and make sure that revenue is being recorded appropriately throughout the year, not just at year end. So we test a sample of customer billings, relate the total cash received during the year to the total revenue, just at a high level to make sure that nothing's jumping out to us. We look at cash received subsequent to year end, and that helps us to substantiate those year end accounts receivable numbers. And again, we want to make sure that of all the receivable and revenues that we test, we want to make sure that the recognition policy is consistent throughout the year. As for cash, cash is a relatively easy area to audit. However, it is such a significant area for any organization or entity that we always make sure that we do an appropriate level of testing over cash. And that primarily relates to sending bank confirmations to independent financial institutions and reviewing bank reconciliations to make sure that if there are any year-end overlapping transactions, that those are being accounted for appropriately and either added to or subtracted from the cash balance at year-end. Next slide, please. So the accrued cost of energy, that is a large balance sheet item for Silicon Valley. So we want to make sure that we have appropriate levels of testing to make sure that that balance is not understated. So when we're typically testing accrued cost of energy or other liabilities, we want to make sure that those liabilities are not understated. And we do that with a various different sorts of testing. We do analytical procedures, but we also look at subsequent cash disbursements that take place after year end and then trace those payments to underlying invoices to make sure that all of those liabilities that should be recorded and captured within the September 30th year end are in fact captured. I'm sorry, was there a question or? Nope, sorry. And lastly, back to the financial statements. Again, we have it in here twice, but this is really a huge part of what we do as auditors. We want to make sure that all the required financial statement disclosures are included. We look for any areas where management could potentially mislead the reader or put their thumb on the scale. And so that's what we mean when we say without bias. So we want to make sure that the information is just what's required to be disclosed and that we don't see any unnecessary information within those financial statements. Next slide, please. So these are some required communications to those charged with governance, which we consider the audit committee to be. So we want to make sure that we note that there were no significant changes in the accounting policies. So we want to make sure that if you're treating something consistently throughout the year, that you're not changing that policy and treating something differently halfway through the year that might be beneficial to the organization. So again, there were no such changes like that we noticed. We didn't find any alternate treatments for accounting principles for material items. So really, this would be a situation where there isn't clear guidance and we're not sure exactly how to treat something. That would be a really unusual situation. And again, this is just a required communication to let this audit committee know that we did not encounter any of those types of items. Next slide, please. We did not propose any material adjustments to the financial statements. We did not identify any instances of fraud within the financial statements. And I always like to stop here and point out that if we had found any instances of fraud, this would not be the first time that you would be hearing about it. We would definitely let you know prior to this meeting if we had uncovered anything like that. We don't wait till the end to bring that to your attention. And so again, we did not identify any fraud. And again, another required communication, just any unusual transactions where there was a lack of guidance. We didn't encounter anything like that during the audit. Next slide, please. We didn't have any difficulties dealing with management, and I think, again, Emmerich had in his slide a chance to ask the auditor that we did not have our scope limited by management, and what that means is, did management try to prevent us from looking at something, or did they not give us any underlying accounting information that we felt was necessary to complete our testing? We did not encounter anything like that. There were no disagreements with management regarding the scope, accounting principles, or any significant matters. And in fact, I'd like to take the time to just say how much we appreciate working with Mike and Karen on the audit. She was a huge help, and it really does make a big difference from our perspective when we get the complete cooperation of management. And so we do like to thank you for that. The next slide, please. That's all from the presentation. I'm happy to answer any parts of either the financial statements or any of our auditing procedures. Really, any topic that the audit committee is interested in.
Questions?
I had a question, Brian. One of the things that you were focusing on was comparing it with other like agencies, similar agencies.
Yes, in regarding to accounting policies and just overall understanding of the entity structure, whether or not we think that there's any processes that again don't make sense from a internal control procedure, or again an accounting policy that doesn't function as intended. We don't evaluate your policies relative to is this the best practice, or is this the most efficient way? That's really a management function. We're really just looking to say, okay, does this process or internal control, is this really designed in an appropriate way to achieve what it's designed to do? And that's where we're kind of looking at other industries and other entities within the industry to make sure that we're not seeing anything unusual or wildly different.
Thank you.
Other questions? No questions from me. I have a few questions, and they may be more clarifying. When you refer to materiality, that's a material difference that would make that would affect the users of the financial statements. And I'll start with a question for Amrit. Who does SVCE have to file formal financial statements, the audited financial statements with every year? Is there a specific filing requirement with the, I don't know, anyone at the state level?
No, not that I'm required of, other than I have to disclose it publicly. All our statements are on our website that the public can access. And then anyone with a financial interest, like counterparties who transact, they have a lot of interest in our, obviously, the rating agencies.
Right. So as a member of the audit committee, I think that the major users of the financial statements are, as you said, the rating agencies and the counterparties in the power purchase agreements, because they're relying on what they see in the financial statements as the financial resources. Okay. So I just wanted to clarify that, and then I suspect there's people from the public that take a look, but and now I'll just kind of go through a couple of questions. You confirmed, Kellen, that there was no scope limitation. I was pleased to see that in your presentation. I'll ask you formally this question on behalf of the audit committee. Are you and your staff independent of Silicon Valley Clean Energy?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Then in terms of the audit report, I know that there's There's the MD&A, management's discussion and analysis. There's the audited financial statements, and there's your opinion. Can you just explain what your opinion is on and the relationship between the financial statements and the MD&A?
Yeah, absolutely. And to your question about independence, we state in our basis for opinion on the first page of our opinion that we are independent. And I'm glad that you brought that up because it is so important. But I'd just like to reiterate that we do include that in our report as required by professional standards because it's such an important facet of the audit. If you read our report, it states, and I know it's a bit wonky accounting language, but we are auditing the basic financial statements, which does not include the management discussion and analysis. We give what's called an in relation to opinion over the management discussion analysis, which means that we've read the MD&A. We don't think there's anything misleading or incorrect in the MD&A. We have reviewed the MD&A and compared it to other accounting records that we have seen throughout the audit. But that's really the limit to our procedures over the MD&A. We don't actually, and nor could we, audit all of the information within the MD&A. And so we don't provide an opinion over the MD&A specifically. And what that translates to in factual reality more is that the MD&A is, as the name implies, management's opportunity to provide information to the reader. And so you're allowed to have a fairly wide breadth of what information you can and cannot include in the MD&A. So management really has more discretion over what they want to include in the MD&A versus the rest of the financial statements, which really do have to follow closely with those required professional standard required disclosures and form and shape of the financial statements. Did I get at what you were asking about?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted you to clarify that for the benefit of everyone, so we have a consistent basis of knowledge. The other thing that I would like you to comment on is internal controls, and I believe that your opinion does not cover internal controls and or weaknesses. Can you just add a little color to that? Your opinion relative to internal controls.
Yeah, so in our report, providing an opinion over internal controls is not a requirement of the basic audit report. So we did not include that in the report that is included with the financial statements. A audit requires that we gain an understanding expressly for the purpose that I mentioned earlier to complete our risk assessment. So we can't do a risk assessment if we don't understand your accounting policies and processes and internal controls. And so that's really the limit that we look at your internal controls. However, we did provide a separate letter that is, we can't include it with the basic opinion letter because it would be outside of professional norms and inappropriate. But we can provide it as a separate letter, basically saying during our limited procedures, we did not identify any internal control issues. And so we did provide that report separately. We just can't include it with the audited financial statements.
Great, thank you. With that, we've all asked questions. Any other questions? No. With that, what I'd like to do is open it for public comment. If you're a member of the public and you're appearing virtually, please raise your hand. I'll close, no hands raised. I'll close public comment on this and bring it back for discussion and then a motion. I am very pleased with the work that was done. We had a separate conversation, Kellen and I, and I'm feel very comfortable in recommending that the board of directors approve the financial statements. That's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I echo the chair's comments.
Yeah, absolutely. Both appreciate Calvin's work and our auditors as well as from what we're hearing in Silicon Valley, clean energy and the internal control.
And I guess the other, oh, sorry, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna go ahead and make the motion if there wasn't one on the floor yet.
I was gonna make one more comment and then I'll bring it back to you for a motion. My comment is that it's good to see that the cooperation exists between management and staff and Mike Marr. So that's all good. And my final comment is that it's always good when there's not very much to talk about. With that, I'll bring it back to you for a motion.
Awesome, great. With that, I'll make a motion to receive the financial audit report and recommend to the board of directors to accept the audit findings.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Chair Makachuk,
Aye.
Vice Chair Mohan,
I,
Director Lopez, Committee Member Sangha.
Aye.
Unanimously.
Thank you. And thanks for attending the meeting.
Thank you, Ellen.
And then we're on item 5, the IT cybersecurity assessment update, and this is a discussion. Nick.
Thank you. Okay. I guess you can need the clicker. It works better for you. Thank you for allowing me to review the cybersecurity assessments and the audits and talk about our cybersecurity journey to a more mature posture. We talked about this a lot last time we met, so a lot of this will be review slides with some updates as well. So this is a good snapshot of our journey, where we started, where we're currently at, and where we hope to be. The pre-scorecard startup section is like when we first started, like as a startup, we were just trying to figure stuff out, get the basic stuff set up, policies, procedures, and tools. The one in the middle, the good section, that's where we are today, where we're actually leaving from today, going to the excellent side. So this is 4 or 5 audits deep, a security assessment that we started in 2022, engagement with a virtual CISO, a virtual chief information security officer that we have, and then the guidance that they provide while we work on our remediations and vulnerabilities. Of course, our goal is to get into the excellent ND scores. We'll mean more on the next few slides. We can go ahead, next slide. So back in 2022, we shifted from the IT audits that we did annually, which is basically hardware, infrastructure, and policies only for IT. We moved into a security assessment, which looks at the whole organization. So it looks at financial policies, it looks at like custodial service, how we manage vendors, all those kinds of things. So 2022 set the baseline of what our scoring matrix is going to look like. So when we first did our audit, we first got back to the results, we came back at a 640, which is not on here, which is pretty good according to the overall utility industry. Last time we met back in, I think it's September, we had a 661. And I'll break down what these scores actually mean on the next slide. Our today's score is 690. So 690, we've improved about 30 points. And as you get higher in the scoring metrics, it's harder to get points. And like we might get 0.21 for doing a big project, right? So we've got all the low hanging fruit. Now we're at the stage where it's incremental. It's like really small amounts. Our next short-term goal by Garish's last date, so we have 30 days, is to get up to the 700 range. So that was a Garish target. So we're going to try to meet that. We'll hopefully be there.
And then I have to move up 150 points?
No, yeah, there's no pressure for you. And then the ultimate goal is going to be in the 780 to 850 range. 850 is a max score according to this security assessment that we're working off of. So what does a score of 690 actually mean? It's hard to tell. It's kind of like the PCIA. There's a mystery box that has a bunch of formulas and calculations, but it is tied to industry standards. So And the vendor that we use has a proprietary vendor assessment in there as well. So it is tied to NIST and to what their calculations are as well. Some or most companies get to the 660 range and they're okay with that. You know, again, we've done a lot and we're okay with that. But we're going to continue past 660 on our goal to the excellent range. So the score does actually break down our assessment into 4 categories. The administrative controls, physical controls, internal technical controls, and external technical controls. It breaks it down and it scores it based upon, or each category has a score up to 850 as well. So we're looking at internal policies, we're looking at hardware, firewalls, and those kind of things, staff trainings, vulnerability scans, and then also the vendor control management as well, our vendor management. So it's not just, you know, we have a firewall, so we're good. It's actually look deeper down. How do you manage your custodial services? Are you doing background checks? So it looks all the way down to that level in these 4 categories. So our short-term target score is really to score 660 or above in all 4 of those phases I just mentioned. Currently, we're probably in the 700, high 700s in 3 of the 4 categories. The last category is the one that gives us the most pain, is the vulnerability remediations. We spent a lot of time and effort to work on the vulnerability management, but at the end of the day, vulnerabilities are scanned. It's a snapshot in time. So if I scan something today at 4 o'clock, and again I scan it tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, it's going to find different things. It's always finding something. So our goal, or when we last met, was to really work towards a better system of remediations in a faster time frame. So since we last met, we've hired an additional IT technician on staff, and we've engaged with a managed service provider to provide us more coverage on the remediations. It's working. So right now we're down to like 55 vulnerabilities that we found today with our scans. But again, I could scan it tomorrow and it might be 400 again, right? So it's a snapshot. But that's really why this 850 target is not realistic, because the vulnerabilities, it's always going to shift and change that score. But we have made dramatic strides on the management of the remediations. So I think with our next score update, we'll see that reflected in it. And then our long-term target score is going to be the 780 to 850 range. And that's super aggressive, knowing that we may never get to 850, and that's fine. Because we've also identified some of the risk remediations that were recommended that we're just not going to do. It's either not enough bang for the dollar, or it's stuff that doesn't pertain to our environment. Some of those are like installing vehicle barriers on the first floor so the car can't drive into your building. We're on the 3rd floor, we don't own the building, so it doesn't pertain to us. So that brings our target score down, realistically into the 780 to 820 range. But for comparison of what our target range is, our virtual CISO, who currently has over 20 different companies that they represent, the highest score that they've ever seen is a 782. And that company is okay with a 782 range, and their goal is not to get to 850, it's just to stay consistently at the 782 or 780, 785 range. And then just want to reiterate the fact that a lot of companies get to the 660 range and they're good with that score, and then they accept the risk after that. Good. Questions before I go to the next section?
Yeah, I have a question. Could you just define remediation for me a little more?
Sure. So we identify a vulnerability, and then with the vulnerability, there should be a remediation. If it's a Microsoft patch, it'll be to download the latest update. If it's a Dell driver, it could be a driver issue. So most of that is just software management or patch management. But sometimes it's also maybe it's a policy or a control that has to be made to identify that remediation. It could be like, make sure you check something every quarter, so we have a ticket made and a process that is made for us to remind us to check it. And then we document that we checked it and we move on. So it's either policy or like software updates or driver updates normally.
And so, understanding that, can you then just explain for me a little bit more why the score doesn't show remediation?
Yeah, so it shows remediations at the time that they were updated. So we do a quarterly scan right now with our provider, and they update the results every quarter. So my technician, well, Brett and myself have went through and remediated all the remediations that we could, but we don't see that reflected till three months later. Right, so right now, this is based off old data. But since then, we're signing a contract with our own vulnerability scanner provider that we can update weekly. So our score will be reflective of the efforts in a more realistic time frame. Because every 3 months we fix all those and there's 1,000 more, right? And then you're fixing those and we're always behind there. So with our own scanner, we'll be able to update this regularly, and then we'll see the results much faster. So that score is going to go up.
Great, that's very helpful.
Yeah. But I just don't want to commit to saying, yeah, it's going to go up this many because, we just don't know what tomorrow brings up on the scan. Okay. Any more questions?
Well, I had one question. What would it take to go up whatever those 30 points in the next 30 days?
Yeah, so
For Monica takes home.
So with our goal of getting to 700 by April or March 31st, I think we're probably already there. We haven't got the updates. And then the ultimate goal will be getting the vulnerabilities in a more realistic reporting timeline. And then we're really only down to probably 50 more items that we need to work on. And most of those are coming up with our process, our policies that we're working on right now. So a lot of this is just going to be the vulnerability scans and getting that fixed. And then Monica's, we'll hopefully get Monica, but the next time we meet, it'll be up in the high 700s for you. So that's our goal. I do want to add also that anytime we complete a remediation from our security assessment, the virtual CISO checks off on it. So we can't just go through and say, oh, this is finished just to improve the score. There is a independent set of eyes that look at that and validate before it gets moved into the finished status, and we get the points for it. So, make that point. All right. So the journey to a more mature cyber posture. There's a lot of stuff on this slide. I'm not going to read through all of it. This is just more to show we've done a lot, we're doing a lot, and we plan to do even more. Right. More than happy to talk offline about specifics on things that we're doing as a company. This is super general, but a lot of stuff goes behind the scenes just to get to the point that we're at, and we acknowledge that a lot more has happened to get into that 720 to 780 range. So we do a lot of that, or we get a lot of our information, the remediations, the recommendations from the audits that we do. Like Amr mentioned earlier, we do 2 audits at different times based upon the CPUC mandates. We have an annual data privacy audit that we do every year. We completed one back last April, and our next one is due this April. This is basically just on the data, or the AMI data, and how we share it and who we share it with. So we work across the organization to get the data, and we present it to the CPUC. The second CPUC mandated audit is the triannual AMI audit. This is a data privacy audit, but it also has the IT audit built into it as well. So we were doing an annual audit ourselves, and then we did a triannual audit again. So there's a lot of there's a lot of duplication there. So we switched from the IT audit to the security assessment that we're in today, back in 2022. This is a 3-year engagement. So we did an audit in 2022. We have a mini audit that we just did in 2023. And then we have the upcoming one this year at the end, probably going to be starting in September, October-ish. And this will be the 3rd year of the cycle. With the security assessment, but like I mentioned earlier, it does more in-depth looks across the organization, not just IT. And that ties us in with the virtual CISO who monitors our progress and helps us roadmap the findings. And the last audit that we've done, we put it on hold right now, is the IT audit, which mainly looks at network, IT systems, and some of the IT policies, and it stops around there. We said that we'll reassess it in late 2024, but we'll probably just bake it into the AMI audit next year, since it is a full audit anyway. All right, so with the audits, we realized that, you know, we've done a lot, sure, but we are still, our biggest risk is going to be our staff and the human firewall part of it. Right, so staff is going to, we are basically the entry point for most possible risks. Through phishing, there's smishing, any type of just making an error, like opening a file or something like that. But we spend a lot of time and effort on training staff, trying to get them to be a better human firewall. Okay? But we do want them to understand the risk that they have on every single mail that comes, every single text that they get, and what their role is with that. So we do extensive training. We do phish tests 4 times a month. And it uses AI to actually look at your mailbox. If you're in finance, you're probably going to get finance phishing. For HR, it's going to be geared towards HR to make it more complex. You know, failures are a good opportunity for us all, for all of us to learn. So we get about five failures a month, maybe at the most. With that, we also do a security module training. So each month we pick a different topic. Everybody on staff has to finish it. All new hires have a base of 10 modules that they have to do on their first week, about 2 hours total, to help get a foundation for them for what to expect. I have seen new hires on day 1 already have phishing attempts in their mailbox. We want to make sure that we train them right off the bat. All new hires have met with our CEO on their first day or so of employment to talk about cybersecurity culture here, and to also for them to understand their role as a human firewall. And then thirdly, on this topic, I do a monthly training that I lead, about 45 minutes, going over current events and best practices, tips and tricks, things that we can do in our work environment, but also on your home life as well. Trying to get cybersecurity to be more of a behavior, not just, well, I have to do this at work, but just like in life in general. All right, so what can you expect the next time we meet? So we'll provide another update on our maturity progress. Hopefully I'll show you that we met our short-term goals between 720 to 800. And then we'll update on the assessment and data privacy audits. So we'll have the annual audit due in April that we'll talk about, and then may have started the 2024 assessment, or we might just be planning to. So we'll have that more ironed out for you by then. Was the last slide I had.
I'm just wondering if you have the scores for the individual 4 phases broken out, and is the overall score an average of those, or how's that calculated?
Yeah, so I do know the four scores. And then it is an average. Some of the categories are weighted differently as far as what makes it get into the final score. So 3 of the 4 categories are well over the 660. The fourth one is 500 range. So that's, we've talked about that internally about how to get that up. Yeah.
I'll just say that cybersecurity is one of the things that really wanted to drill into it. We'd have to have a closed session on. Can you talk about that briefly?
Yeah, so historically and I see other CCAs post a lot of stuff that they shouldn't be posted about, what findings or recommendations of vulnerabilities. But it's so easy for somebody to go in and see, oh, they have a vulnerability. I'm going to go right through that door, right? So we don't post any of that stuff anymore. We don't talk about in open sessions. We really want anything that is specific to our environment, to our organization, to be done through a closed session. And I don't know, we don't have anything scheduled for that, but we could definitely do that in more detail for sure. Or I can talk offline. Is that brown out? I mean, one-on-one's fine. Okay. Yeah. And if you want to talk specifics, I'll be more than happy to talk after the meeting once it ends.
And I'll just say as a follow-up, I fully understand it and have no problem with that. I mean, I'm very appreciative that we do that. But I do think with my other boards, it's common when we're doing a security, especially cybersecurity assessment to schedule a closed session. So it might be worth thinking about at some point in the committee's plan for the year to do one as an add-on to one of these, just a suggestion.
Maybe the one in September we can have.
That's for the whole board or just for the audit committee?
That way, when I know items get recommended to go to the full board, and then the board can have confidence that the items have really been vetted.
Do you have any questions?
No, I think that's a great idea. If we plan for something like that, two questions. One is on slide, you talk about the sharing of your automated metering infrastructure. Are you able to kind of give examples, what kind of entities or consumers or third parties that we may be sharing the AMI data with?
Yeah. Want to bring up the slides or, yeah, so we have vendor contracts set up with a lot of our program vendors. That we share customer data as for them to be able to work on the programs that they're facilitating for us. So we have a data sharing contract that we have that has data provisions. So if they're going to be accessing customer data, they have to make sure it's encrypted, and there's a lot of requirements that we have for those vendors. I think it was.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So we don't share any customer data or the AMI data with any vendor until they've worked through our vendor contract.
The data sharing, and that includes the data sharing component to it?
And we also run them through the vendor that does the AMI audit for us. We have them do not a mini audit, but they actually look at how they're going to be getting the data, how they're going to be storing the data. So we take it a step further than what we really have to, but we just want to make sure that the vendor, once they get the data, that they are secure enough. So are they SOC 2 audited? Are they are they going to be able to meet our vendor requirements? So we take it a step further. With the same vendor that does the AMI audit, we actually look at that vendor as well before we share with them.
Got it. Thank you. And the second question was just in general, I heard you mention the artificial intelligence. Are you able to speak to what you're kind of seeing in the cyber world and in the industry specific to this, as well as any plans for active uses of AI within the infrastructure right now?
Currently, when I mentioned AI earlier, that was tied to our phishing vendor, our fish test vendor. So they use AI as one of their tools for us to be able to get more realistic phishing. AI for us as an internal tool. Currently, we have a small project team that we're testing it, and we're setting up a policy on what the use cases will be for our test project, our pilot project, I should say. So we're at the early stages of it right now. We have a team of, I think, probably 6 volunteers that are going to be working on it. A couple on the data team that will use it for code, and then a few others just for other parts of their functions. So by the time we meet next time, I think we'll have a more realistic look about what that looks for us as a company. But right now, it works at the early stages because there's so many vendors out there making sure. I mean, and a lot of the vendors' privacy policies are horrible, right? So we don't want to even put them into our test group because the data that we put in there, it's shared, right? So we want to make sure this test group is really not. I mean, they're focusing only on non-customer data for one, our PII data, but it's really just stuff that will not affect us on the audits at all, right? So very, very like we just started like about a month ago, and we're still making the policy right now.
Great, thank you.
I have a couple of questions, and I kind of ask these questions regardless of the subject. With SVCE, I'm wondering where SVCE's cybersecurity is relative to other CCAs. That's kind of one. And then the other is, what are their objectives if they are publicly stated? And so where are we relative to our peers in the CCA industry? And then the last question is, have there been any cybersecurity breaches with other CCAs? And I understand confidentiality, but can you speak to where we are, where SVCE is relative to others in the CCA industry?
Sure, I can speak based on just what I know. I work with probably 4 or 5 other CCA IT teams, and we're constantly sharing information. A lot of times, we're sharing what we're doing, and then they ask for the vendors that we're using to catch up kind of thing. Not saying we're ahead of them, because it's probably, they're doing things that we're not doing probably too. But I do know that we're on par or ahead of some, for sure. As far as, I mean, we were doing IT audits back in 17, 18, which was, I mean, we're 12 people yet, we're still doing IT audits. So we were well ahead of the game there. And then now that we've moved to the security assessment with a virtual CISO, I've had conversations about what that means and then how that works with other CCAs who aren't doing that yet. And a lot of that just price. I mean, it does cost so many things, but luckily our CEO and CFO, you know, understand the importance of cyber, and they give us a pretty good budget that we can do these things. Other organizations may not have that budget. Yeah, so we do share, we are in communication a lot, and then we're providing them what we've done and who we've used. And then on that score that we showed earlier, how we do with the utilities, I think it was at 630, I don't have the slide up, but it was like 630, and we started off, our first score was higher than that, we're right off the bat. So utility wise, you know, which is not like apples to apples, but and I don't think there's any other CCAs that are using this service, so we can't see how they're doing versus us. But I think where we're at, our posture is favorable from what I know of the ones that I work with.
And the third question was on the breaches.
Oh, I wasn't trying to avoid it. Haven't heard anything. I get breach updates from out, you know, just companies in general, like industries, but nothing from the CCA realm. I don't know if they would tell us. I guess eventually it would be out, you know, in the media, but yeah, I haven't heard anything specific from any of the CCAs.
So I'll make a comment after public comment. Are there any other questions? Oh.
Yeah, thank you. All good questions, which raised another one that I was wondering about early in the slide, which is, given what you just said, when you're using the language of talking about relative to industry, there's a couple of places in the first slides. I guess I was assuming that meant CCA, but what does that actually mean?
Just the utility industry
Okay.
total. So like anybody could think, there's several vendors that do security assessments, so they're only going to show the scores that they manage, right?
Okay.
So they're not going to, if a CCA is not in their system, then we don't know what the results would be. That's just the average. They have a like our virtual CISO alone has 20 clients plus, and they have 12 virtual CISOs on staff. So you figure 12 times 20 roughly or so. So there's a lot of data in there for sure. But the utilities are going to be more probably non-CCA. I mean, there might be one in there. I just don't know that if they're in there or not. So it's more of utility based, even though we're not a true utility, but they try to put us in context with that kind of field.
Other questions? No? With that, I would like to open this for public comment. If you're appearing remotely, please raise your virtual hand. Then we'll close public comment, and I'll just make a comment that I believe that SVCE's customers rely on having a robust cybersecurity environment here where their data, and it's something that where we add value. Last thing we or anyone in the CCA industry want is some sort of data breach. I applaud and commend you for that. And also I'm pleased that we've got the budget we can afford to reach for those higher scores. So those are kind of my comments. And I think this is an information only item. There's no action.
I also just want to say, Nick, thank you for all your work and your whole team. Culture is one of the most difficult things with any organization, but one of the most important and impactful. And it sounds like from what I hear in the presentation that not just the practices and the technology that we're using is strong, but the employee culture, and that's really to be commended. I know there's a lot of work that goes into that.
With that, that concludes item 5, committee staff remarks. No? We're good?
I guess I'll just take the initiative to say, as again, someone who's not a regular board member, but welcome, really excited to have your leadership and congratulations and look forward to working with you at least on this committee.
I should have probably introduced myself because I don't think many people know me. Like Sheila and Brian, Dr. Mohan and Mohammed. But I am Monica Padilla. I'm currently the COO. I was the COO and Director of Power Resources. I recently dropped the Director of Power Resources from my title since we have a new Director of Power Resources. His name is Chris Van Vector. I will be the CEO come April 1st. Board's decision to put me in that role since Garish is retiring. Happy to meet you as well. I've heard really great things about you. I don't think we've met at all, and I'm sorry to say that I have to. Sangha, community member Sangha, it's nice to meet you as well. And
Likewise, congratulations on your new role.
thank you. And I guess since we only meet like twice a year, we'll see you in September again, but hopefully you guys can come to board meetings. They're always very informative. Our next board meeting is going to be, there's going to be an event right before it to celebrate Garish. Hopefully all of you can make it. I know that the board members will be there for sure. We appreciate everyone attending. It's going to be a great event and a good opportunity to meet some staff directly as well.
Other committee staff remarks? No? Well, with that, we will adjourn the February 29th meeting, audit committee meeting at 2:20 p.m.